Welcome to SciTech Culture with Steve Kern and Ben Warner, where we examine science, technology, and culture in the 21st century. Visit our website at scitechculture.com. Hello and welcome to SciTech Culture. My name is Ben Warner and I'm joined once again by my good friend and colleague Steve Kern. How are we today, Steve? I'm a little bit more disturbed by Facebook and Twitter at the moment compared to a few days ago after the Mueller indictment over the weekend. How do you feel about it?
Yeah, well, it's an interesting sort of summation of what's going on social media. I think we've known these things for quite a while, but we've never been able to put our finger on them. This is one particular case, but we're going to talk about the implications.
Yeah, absolutely. So to set the groundwork for that, obviously there was the indictment over the weekend by the special prosecutor Robert Mueller in the States against 13 Russian nationals who in effect had basically their allegations around they had started a sophisticated and I should say well-financed social media campaign using Facebook and Twitter to buy political ads to at first sow the seeds of discord and distrust amongst the American public and particular people that were integrally involved in campaigns and political campaigns, etc. And to the extent of organizing actual political rallies on the ground. Like that was actually a fairly big surprise that came out of it. And that there was at first that, but then there was a conscious switch to help Trump win the presidency at one point and to disparage Hillary Clinton. And that they disguised their identities, communicated with unwitting individuals associated with the Trump campaign in an attempt to coordinate political activities. Very very big stuff, and obviously we've covered Trump a couple of times. We can sort of touch a little bit on that, but I'm thinking that what's actually more important in this, we've spoken before about a concern that with these types of sites, Facebook, Twitter, any sort of, I guess, online site, that the real danger was that someone was going to crack it and then broadcast all of the information that they found to the world to be used by anyone for whatever purpose. What's actually more disturbing about this, and maybe something we didn't really specifically touch on, was that based on what this indictment says, it looks like these guys actually used those services the way they were intended for their nefarious purposes, which to me almost sounds like it's worse than if they hacked it. To the point where they actually motivated actions of American citizens to go out and do stuff. Where do you even begin with something like that? And I mean, if you're like running Facebook and Twitter, how do you respond to that?
Well, let's cut straight to the chase here. I mean, Facebook definitely, Twitter maybe a little bit less, but they're designed to evoke emotion. They're designed to capture people's attention and create some sort of interest in something. So they're there effectively to manipulate us. Our emotions. Facebook, of course, famously in 2012 had the experiment where they manipulated users' emotions. And as you say, this nefarious usage is exactly using it exactly the way that Facebook and Twitter were intended, to capture people's imagination, to get them to respond, to get them to engage in a particular opinion or thought or action. I think that's where it gets really, really difficult. We've seen Facebook now in particular with a number of its new features, such as the live stream used to show bashings, killings, hate. It's certainly not Facebook's intention for it to be used that way, but it is a tool that can be used that way. What we're seeing here is just someone else using the tool the way it was intended. It raises huge philosophical questions about what to do with Facebook. Twitter, of course, if it's used as a media feed, as a news feed, which so many do, fake news in there from someone that appears respected or has a lot of followers is is also a huge problem.
Well, I think you touched on it there that, it's almost obviously Facebook is manipulating users in the sense of wanting them to stay on their site. That's really their only intention to generate, which will then feed its money making side of things. But
their advertising products, it's an advertising platform.
Yeah.
So it's a platform designed to engage people on an emotional level to get an emotional response.
But it would seem in this case that that's one aspect, but then it's at the core of its design. It allows for people to do it against other people, users to do it against other users, as opposed to the big bad corporation doing it against the users, which is kind of an interesting new development in this sort of thing. Oh, well, I don't know how new it is, but to me it feels like it's not something we've had to deal with before.
No, it's not. And this comes back to, what you can see that these, Russian organisations have done is they've ceded mob rule. So all they've had to do is put the thought out there, and then there's some other, numbskull who jumps on the idea and organises a rally. They don't even have to get out of their bedroom or wherever they're sitting, in another country. And a group of these crazy sort of, whoever they are, who agree with that opinion and hate whoever it is, are motivated then to act. So it's really mob rule. In the past, what we're traditionally used to is, a leader or a dictator inciting mob rule. But now what we're finding is that this can be done facelessly by anonymous or fictitious people and organisations to get that mob rule started. And that's the emotional aspect of Facebook, where, it's galvanising these really poor ideas and opinions and getting people to act on them. It's human nature, and it's the worst side of it.
To play devil's advocate for Facebook and Twitter and other social media sites, it's almost like, what do you do? Because that very core of what it's doing there can also be done for good purposes as well, to connect people and et cetera, coordinate messages for good purposes and whatever. And it would seem like to counteract this type of bad behaviour or nefarious behaviour, even some might say criminal behaviour, if it turns out these guys get charged and convicted, if they ever get them into an American court, of course. It would seem like that, based on how Facebook and Twitter were set up, how they were created, what they were intended to be used for, would be fundamentally compromised if some action was taken to curtail this behaviour on those sites. It's almost as if they would. It just doesn't work unless these guys, if they're smart enough to work out a different way of doing it, whether it's the way you verify your identity or whatever. I don't know how they would do it, but it would seem like at the moment that it would fundamentally compromise their service if they were to attempt to stop this type of thing from happening, because all of the bad stuff might get stopped, but then all the good stuff would be stopped at the same time.
Well, absolutely. And then you'd have to force everyone to really prove that they're a real person and responsible for their comments, in which case the whole Facebook model would fall over. So,
Well, they're going to go to the extent of how you prove yourself to a bank, for instance, or how do you prove yourself to the tax department or the government and some other government agency?
Exactly. I think that's ultimately where it will head, because the regulators will come in and that's where it'll go. And at that point, I'm not going to give my details to Facebook.
Is it? Yeah, exactly. And I mean, we talked about this just recently, that it's almost becoming a utility. In which case, should they be treated in the same way?
Well, if you look at what you go through to get a mobile phone these days, it's not a huge extension, and Facebook already really attempts it. For them to have your mobile phone number. If you're going to use them, on a mobile device. So it's not a huge leap. It's not as if it's something they couldn't do. But I think that if they did, it would seriously damage their model. And to be quite honest about this. I think if you took away all the fake news and all the rubbish that's on Facebook, there probably wouldn't be and the advertising, there probably wouldn't be very much left.
Yeah, exactly. That's right. Well, they might start connecting people again with their posts as they originally intended.
Yeah.
Or they won't make any money off of it.
Exactly. They'd have to find a new way, move to a subscription model or something. So, I mean, Facebook also is under threat with their stats at the moment as well. And so you can see that we're now seeing a maturing of the Facebook model, the maturing of the Facebook business. But I think that what's starting to happen now, what this will precipitate, is a maturing of regulation of these types of organisations. I mean, you're already hearing murmurs about what happened to Microsoft with the antitrust. And I think that this is basically going to result in probably not the same sort of antitrust regulation that occurred with Microsoft, although when you have Facebook dominating social media, maybe you should, or there would be an argument to. But I think it'll land in the regulation space, and I think things could get very difficult for Facebook.
Well, to return to this Russian indictment part of the story, I'm wondering if this will be a catalyst of sorts. It'll be a long-winded process, of course, to get to a place where something fundamentally is done. But the thing that this story sort of highlights, I think, and hopefully it has the potential to do so, is to actually highlight the problem for real, and then there are criminal consequences stemming from it, which is where it seems to be pointing, the direction it seems to be pointing. That's why I kind of think the way this was presented and the way it sort of came out was actually a very clever move on behalf of those prosecutors, because it's like they have to be exactly in this era of Trump fake news, and everyone's fighting each other about what their truth is. They have to be on point with this stuff. They cannot in any unequivocal way be wrong. Everything they say has to be backed up with a ton of evidence. And it seems like that's what they're doing. So barring some, sort of screw up on their part, if they keep going down this route, maybe there is a way to address this. Not only, I guess, the Trump part of it, but also the way social media and this other type of new media forms are being used.
Well, you're definitely touching on something here. I mean, we'd all be naive to think that political parties during elections, legitimate political parties, aren't using similar tactics to what we've seen the Russians do. The difference is that in Australia and the States, we're protected by the fact that you can't, really create fake news to get yourself ahead in an election. But, politicians and political parties are always willing to push it. So this is very interesting ground. Even in our own elections in Australia, we've not really ever had a close examination of how Facebook is used. And I've certainly seen questionable posts in the past. So you wonder maybe there's going to be some spillover to that. And considering we already have laws based on what you can and can't do, it's going to be quite interesting to see how that shapes up in the future too.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Steve, we might wrap it up there, and we'll just have to see how it plays out. I have a suspicion that this is going to take a lot longer to resolve than not, but hopefully it's going in the right direction.
Let's hope so.
Yeah, absolutely. So don't forget our website, SciTechCulture.com. You can get all of our links and content there. We've got our videos, YouTube, Vimeo, subscribe to all our channels, etc. And hopefully you'll enjoy the content that we keep uploading to it. All right, so that's it for this episode. We'll catch you next time.